The Iran-US standoff has reached a boiling point, with nuclear negotiations collapsing, threats flying, and military assets on high alert. The world stands on the edge of a new war. Trump has warned of devastating airstrikes, while Khamenei vows a strong blow in retaliation against American military establishments in the region. As tensions spiral, is West Asia about to explode into full-scale conflict? And what are the installations that Iran is eyeing? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. Tensions between the United States of America and Iran have been simmering for years, with the ongoing nuclear negotiations often serving as the backdrop to their complex relationship. A 2012 simulation conducted by the Saban Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institution offered a glimpse into how such a confrontation could unfold. The simulation posited that the US and Iran were on the brink of war, with escalating provocations and covert actions pushing both sides closer to the edge. As tensions have only grown in the years since, the question remains, how close are we to a catastrophic military clash between these two powers in West Asia? Iran's refusal to engage in direct negotiations represents a stark shift from President Pezeshkian's initial campaign rhetoric, where he promised a more pragmatic approach to Western relations.
مذاکره به طور مستقیم رد شده، اما مذاکره به طور غیر مستقیم همیشه ایران در اون رابطه بوده و الان هم آقا معظم رهبری تاکید فرمودن که مذاکره غیر مستقیم همچنان میتونه ادامه داشته باشه. ما از مذاکره نه تنها پرهیز نمی‌کنیم بلکه اون بدعهدی هاست که برای ما مشکل ایجاد کرده تا کنون باید ثابت بکنن که میتونن اعتماد رو در رابطه با تصمیمات ایجاد بکنن که امیدوارم اینم شکل بگیره.
However, Supreme Leader Khamenei's influence remains paramount, and his denunciation of direct talks as unwise and dishonorable has set the tone for Iran's stance.
ملت‌های دنیا عصبانی ان ناراحتن تا اونجایی که اطلاع دارن از بسیاری از مسائل از جنایات کشورهای دنیا ملت‌های دنیا اطلاع ندارن. اینی که می‌بینید تو خیابان‌های اروپا و حتی آمریکا علیه رژیم صهیونیستی شعار میدن به خاطر اطلاعات محدود اونهاست. اطلاعات بیشتری داشته باشن بیشتر از این هم میکنن. نتیجه این حرفایی که عرض میکنم اینه که این گروه تبهکار باید از فلسطین ریشه کن بشود. مواضع ما همه بدانند مواضع ما همون مواضعی است که بود. دشمنی آمریکا و رژیم صهیونیستی هم همونی است که بود. تهدید میکنن که شرارت خواهند کرد. البته اگر شرارتی انجام بگیره ما خیلی اطمینان نداریم، احتمال زیاد نمیدیم که از بیرون شرارتی انجام بگیره، اما اگر شرارتی انجام بگیره قطعاً ضربه متقابل محکم خواهند خورد. اگر به فکر این باشن که در داخل کشور فتنه راه بیاندازن مثل بعضی از سالهای قبل که راه انداختن، جوابشون رو خود ملت ایران خواهند داد.
The simulation conducted by Brookings Institution in 2012 highlighted the delicate balance of power and the low margin of error between the United States and Iran. It demonstrated how small miscalculations and covert actions could quickly spiral into an all-out conflict. Fast forward to 2025 and the stakes are even higher. While the focus of the simulation was on covert actions and diplomacy, the real-world developments have made military strikes increasingly likely. With Iran continuing to advance its nuclear program and the US maintaining a significant military presence in West Asia, the potential for direct confrontation is palpable. If Iran were to decide to attack US military installations in West Asia, it would likely begin with a series of coordinated strikes designed to cripple the US military's ability to respond effectively. Iran's strategy would likely focus on high-value targets, installations that are critical to US military's operations in the region. Iran's initial offensive would be a carefully coordinated mix of missile attacks, drone warfare, and cyber operations. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps would prioritize high-value US military installations within its missile range. Among the primary targets, Udeid Air Base in Qatar. As United States Central Command's forward headquarters, this base would be a prime target. Iran's Khyber-Shekan missile, which has a range of 1,450 kilometers, could strike runways, fuel depots, and command centers, crippling US air operations. Al-Dhafra Air Base of the UAE. Home to US F-35s and advanced surveillance aircraft, this base could face multiple ballistic and cruise missile strikes. Naval Support Activity Bahrain. Headquarters of the US Fifth Fleet, a successful strike here could severely limit US naval dominance in the Persian Gulf. Beyond direct strikes, Iran would deploy cyber warfare to disable critical US defense systems, jamming radar stations and launching cyber attacks on command structures. While direct attacks on US military installations would be devastating, Iran's approach to warfare would likely extend beyond conventional military strikes. As a regional power, Iran has built an extensive network of allied militias and proxies in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. These groups could be mobilized to target US interests and allies across West Asia, further escalating the conflict. In Iraq, Iranian-backed militias such as Kataib Hezbollah would likely launch drone and rocket attacks on US positions, particularly in Erbil and Al-Assad. These militias have already carried out numerous attacks on US bases in Iraq, and the threat of future assaults remains high. In Syria, groups like the Fatemiyon Brigade, which is composed of Afghan fighters loyal to Iran, would likely target US positions in Al-Tanf, a critical outpost in southern Syria. Iran has a vested interest in dismantling the US bases, as it serves as a key base for US counter-terrorism operations and support for local militias. In Lebanon, Hezbollah, a powerful Shiite militia with close ties to Iran, could open a new front against both Israel and US military assets in the Mediterranean. Hezbollah's advanced missile capabilities could be used to target US naval vessels operating in the region, while their fighters could carry out ground operations in support of Iranian objectives. In Yemen, the Houthi rebels, who are supported by Iran, could target US vessels operating in the Red Sea, as they have been in the recent past, striking not just American flag-bearing vessels but also Israeli flag-bearing vessels or those companies and countries who support Israel. They could also launch strikes in Saudi Arabia and UAE military bases, further drawing US forces into the conflict. Iran's proxy network would play a pivotal role in creating multiple fronts for the US to defend, making it harder for Washington, D.C. to focus its resources and retaliate effectively. Well, it is not going to be a one-sided war at all. In response to such a devastating attack, the United States would likely launch a massive retaliation to assert its military dominance and cripple Iran's ability to project power in the region. The US military's response would likely consist of a combination of airstrikes, cyber attacks, and a naval blockade. The US Air Force would initiate precision airstrikes, likely using stealth bombers such as the B-2 Spirit, to target key Iranian military facilities. These would include missile silos, command centers, and nuclear sites, particularly those related to Iran's nuclear program. The US would aim to inflict maximum damage on Iran's ability to wage war by hitting its military infrastructure and supply lines. The US Navy would enforce a blockade of Iranian shipping lanes, effectively cutting off the flow of oil and supplies to and from Iran. This would place immense pressure on the Iranian economy, which relies heavily on oil exports. The presence of US aircraft carriers in the Arabian Sea serve as a constant reminder of America's military superiority, while also offering a launch pad for airstrikes and maritime operations. The immediate consequences of a US-Iran military conflict would be devastating, not just for the two countries involved, but for the entire region. A full-scale conflict would disrupt global oil markets, sending shockwaves through the world economy. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a critical choke point for global oil shipments, could send oil prices soaring and destabilize international trade. In addition, the US and Iran are not the only players in this conflict. Russia and China, both of whom are strategic partners of Iran, could offer diplomatic support or intelligence to Tehran. This would complicate US efforts to isolate Iran and could lead to further diplomatic confrontations between the great powers. Meanwhile, Israel, which has long viewed Iran as an existential threat, could seize the opportunity to strike Iranian nuclear facilities. This would further escalate the conflict and potentially draw other regional powers into the fray. If nuclear facilities were targeted, the risk of a nuclear escalation would be heightened, especially given the potential for miscalculation on both sides. An all-out war between the US and Iran would have catastrophic consequences for both nations and the broader region. While both countries understand the devastating impact such a conflict would have, a miscalculation such as a preemptive Iranian strike on US installations could quickly escalate into a wider war with irreversible consequences. With regional powers like Israel, Saudi Arabia, and others potentially involved, the conflict could spill over into a broader Middle Eastern war, dragging in major global players and potentially destabilizing the entire region for years to come. The simulation conducted by Brookings Institution in 2012 serves as a stark reminder of how easily tensions between the US and Iran could escalate into a full-blown conflict. While both sides are likely to be cautious in their actions, the growing animosity, coupled with military posturing and provocative actions, makes the prospect of war increasingly likely. Will diplomacy prevail, or will a catastrophic miscalculation ignite a war that neither side can afford to lose? Thank you for watching Statecraft.